Okay, welcome back to Penniac Wilderness. Happy New Year. It's the early part of 2024, and on today's video I'm going to do a complete updated tour of the Dovetail log cabin. Hope you enjoy it. So for the tour video, you may wonder why I'm not yet at the cabin, and that's because for this video I wanted to do the video as though you were coming with me and I was taking you into the cabin just to get a full experience of what it's like to leave the city or wherever you may live and travel through the woods into the cabin and show you what that portion's like before we start the tour of the cabin. I'm standing on one of the access points to the cabin. There's about 4 or 5 different ways I can access the cabin. I've got this better quality road for bringing in loads of wood or lumber or whatnot. There's an ATV path that somewhat parallels this route but winds its way through the woods in a little different direction. There's a hiking path that goes along the stream lower down that I share with a neighbor. And then there's 2 other accesses. So one is the stream itself, which sometimes will freeze enough that you can ski or snowshoe that. And then I actually bought the property on the other side of the stream from the cabin about 2 years ago, so I can access the cabin from that property, but there's not really a path and you have to cross the stream in order to get to the cabin, so it's not an option all times of the year. And so depending on what I'm doing at the cabin or what project I'm up to determines which method of transportation and which route I might take to get to the cabin. Let's go down to the cabin. We'll walk down. Yesterday I brought my ATV to the cabin, and that's a nice way to go. That's probably the way I go the most. Even in the winter I'll often take the ATV if I can keep my road. I'll just drag it with my tractor, but if I can keep it smooth, I'll take the ATV into the cabin. It's the quickest way. I can put some gear on, and it allows me to get in and out pretty quickly. If I get stuck, it's got a winch. But we'll walk the rest of the way down and go from there. I'll just put this PV back because I'm going to do some hopefully logging later. So that wasn't planned, but that just goes to show you how steep these hills are getting in and out of the cabin. All right, we're down at the cabin. So I'm outside the cabin right now. So I started building this cabin in 2019. I purchased a sawmill from Woodland Mills in 2018, just around Christmas time. Started milling through the 2019 winter, started building in about the 2019 fall, and started YouTube around that time. So I built the cabin, and then I went and built a series of outbuildings. So what have I got? I've got maybe 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 outbuildings at the cabin. So in the order I built them, I built just a tool shed, an outhouse, a wood shed, and a small generator shed. That may not even count, it's pretty basic. So let's just go look at the outbuildings first. I'll give you a rundown of them. There's full videos on all of those outbuildings if you're interested in watching how I did them and why I made them the way I made them. But I'll show you those and then we'll head inside. This shed I built shortly after I finished the cabin because I needed somewhere to be able to store tools that wasn't the cabin anymore. So I just kind of threw this together. It wasn't built with any particular attention to detail. Just a basic shed. What is it? 10 by 10 or something like that. 2x4 framed shed style roof, but it's been good. I used it the first winter to store tools and firewood, but have since built a wood shed. So this was the first thing I built. My neighbor Billy helped me build it, and it's worked well. This shed has been converted into a temporary outdoor shower, and I do intend to build a separate building for that at some point, but just haven't got to that yet. Yeah, so this was the first outbuilding I built. Definitely something I needed. Because with a small cabin like I've got, there just wasn't space to store everything inside the cabin, and this shed was the perfect solution for that at the time. The next thing I built was this outhouse. Obviously an outhouse is pretty important at an off-grid cabin, and so I put this together. When was that? Maybe over the first winter I was at the cabin. And yeah, this outhouse was the first time I used lap siding, which is a style of siding that I like. I've got a jig for my sawmill that allows me to tilt the carriage, and so you can have a cant of lumber and you can take an angled pass to make your first pizza lap siding, flatten the sawmill carriage, drop it down slightly, make another pass, drop it down slightly, tilt, and keep going like that to make lap siding, which I used on this outhouse. I also used on the woodshed. So the outhouse was a pretty key piece of infrastructure here at the cabin. I have a toilet in it that's from a place called the Cabin Depot, who do sort of support the channel. There's a link for them in the description, and they sell all sorts of off-grid living appliances. So that's the outhouse. I'm counting this generator shed as one of the outbuildings. It probably really doesn't count, but I wanted to show it because I do have a generator that I use. So I use it for multiple reasons. If I'm running any form of power tool, I need something that can put out enough power to be able to run them. So I run it for that. I also run it if my batteries in the cabin get low. So if there's a stretch of time where there's not good sun exposure, or I'm using a lot more power than usual, I'll start the generator to run it to help charge up the batteries inside. They also charge with solar and can charge with the generator and solar at the same time, but it's enough to keep the weather off the generator. So this video is not a review of this generator, other than to say I've been quite happy with it. It's a brand called Furman that I'd never heard of before I made the purchase, but I've had it for probably 2+ years, which includes 2 winters, and I'm running this when it's cold out. I'm starting it when it's cold out, and it's worked very well. I've got it wired so that it's wired into the cabin. It'll charge all my batteries, and as well as there's an outlet in the cabin from this. So the woodshed was the most recent outbuilding that I built. And I finished that, I guess I really just finished that a few months ago or less. And this has been really nice because I mentioned earlier that the shed that I built, I did store wood in for the first winter, but it's pretty small and I didn't really like having wood in there and tools and a bit of a workshop. Because I didn't like that, I ended up moving my wood for the second winter outside. I had some on the deck of the cabin, and then I had some just under tarps scattered around the property here. And that wasn't ideal because if it snowed, you had to shovel off snow, dig your wood out of the snow. Sometimes as the snow got so high, it was almost as high as your wood pile. So I really wanted to get this woodshed built, and I actually started this woodshed about a year ago this time. Worked on it off and on throughout the past 12 months, finished it quite recently, and have all my firewood in there. So this is so much better to have my wood undercover in here. So that's a tour of my outbuildings. I didn't want this first part of the video to be too detailed, but just to give you a sense of the layout of the land here. And you can see from looking above, looking down, kind of the layout of all of these buildings. And maybe one thing before we do go inside, I just want to show you the stream, because I think the stream is, that to me is what drew me to this location. Is I knew there was a stream, but I didn't know if there was a place that was A, flat enough, and B, up off the stream enough to actually build on. And I found this spot a number of years ago and sort of had it in my mind that one day, if my circumstances and finances and life situation allowed it, that I wanted to try building something here, and finally get the opportunity to do. So let's just go down to the stream before we head into the cabin. The stream here at the cabin, to me, it's one of the most, it's the nicest part about living in this particular location and having the cabin here. So I can sit in the front of the cabin, the extension that I put on, or I can sit in the top of the cabin, or just sit outside and watch a kingfisher coming up and down the stream. I can see fish in the stream. Sometimes you'll see a beaver or otter. There's bald eagles that fly up and down the stream, and all sorts of other species that are unique to an ecosystem that has aquatic life. I also like the utility of the stream. You can use the stream for swimming, cooling off, bathing. I don't use it for drinking water, but I use it for washing my dishes water. I use it for shower water. But so the stream's just something that's really nice, and I really enjoy having this here. We'll just throw a couple pieces of softwood in when we head in. So this is I call this the back of the cabin. This is the door that we use always. So there's a bit of a porch here. I've got a barbecue, a propane oven, and a little bit of space here that I can sit or store some things. There's also about, I don't know what that would be, 4 feet or something of overhang here, which allows me to park an ATV or snowmobile in here out of the weather. So let's head in and put some wood in the fire, and I'll take you a tour. For the tour, we'll start in the main original cabin. We'll go into the extension, then we'll head upstairs. We'll go up front, which is the loft overlooking the stream. Then we'll move our way through the top level of the cabin into the rear bedroom, and I'll show you how the cabin is in 2024. So I'll throw that wood in and get started. So as you come in the cabin, you're coming through the pine door that I built. So that was this large pine that needed to come down. I took 2 slabs, I don't know if they're 16-inch slabs, put them together, got some hinges built from a local metal worker, and that's been the door of the cabin. And then to your right as you come in, there's a boot rack and a bit of a storage area. I've got this, I've used this old plumbing pipe. This, you might think, why is there a big bar of plumbing pipe coming out by your head? But it's because I use it to hang this lantern. I can sit here, or I can sit on the couch, which is just kind of under here, have some light cast from this, and just enjoy the evening here at the cabin. A new thing I put in this fall at the cabin is this wood box. So this is something that my mother's father built, and I'd had it at the old cabin. So that's nice. It'll hold a lot more wood than the box I had here before. I think we've got 1, 2, at least 3 of these spoon boards, we call them. So they're just a slab of wood stained or sealed with something, and then some spoons that have been bent as coat hooks. And they're really handy because 1, it's nice to have a place to hang stuff, but then 2, because you're often coming here in the winter or even any time of year with wet stuff, you can hang it up near the fire to dry. So there's a series of those around the cabin. So one of the bigger changes at the cabin in the last month or 2 is I updated the wood stove setup here. So what I did is, prior to this, I had just 2 pieces of roofing metal around the wood stove and the same hearth underneath. But that was something I always wanted to change. And I wanted to change that, 1, maybe for fire safety, although I think the metal was fine. But the main reason I wanted to change it is because of the extra added radiant heat that this will give. So once this heats up, there'd be many pounds of mass here. Once these rocks and stone heat up, they stay warm for quite a period of time. And so if I leave the cabin to go to town or to work or to do something, this will keep heat in the cabin far longer than what I had set up previously. That was one reason. And then the other reason is I'd never really tried building anything like this before. And so one of my motivations in doing all of this is just expanding my skills and what I'm able to do in my building. So obviously this is fairly rough, but it's a start. And I think if I did one again, I've learned quite a bit already in the process. So the wood stove has an air vent at the bottom, but it never had a damper in the stovepipe. And one thing I was noticing is it just felt like a lot of times the heat from the fire was just essentially escaping. So by having this damper, I don't know how much of people watching this have used a damper, but essentially there's a plate inside the stovepipe that can either sit, well, it can sit vertically, horizontally, or somewhere in between. And what that does is controls how quickly the smoke and heat leaves the stove. I'm starting a fire, obviously I want it vertical so that you can get a draft and the wood burning. But when you've got a good fire or a bed of coals, you can turn this down, and that really slows down the heat loss and keeps more heat in the cabin, and also makes your wood burn longer. So that's something that I added here. Although simple, it made a big difference in keeping warmth in the cabin. And part of the reason I felt the need to do this is when I put on the extension at the front of the cabin, I found that it wasn't heating up as quickly as I wanted to, and this seems to have really helped. And then I also had some of that plumbing pipe that I painted and made into just a bit of a rack here, so I can store frying pans and pots on it. But also if I'm, like, say I'm cooking something on the stove and then it's done, or I want to slow down how quickly it's cooking, I can set it up here so it's off the stove. It's also out of the way, and because these are made of metal, there's no risk of burning or doing any damage to a wood countertop. Another thing you may notice about the hearth I've built, if that's the right word, is I put a bunch of flat rocks at the top here, and I did that just so I had a place that I could put some stuff. So I made some coffee this morning, for example, and so when that was finished, I was able to just put it here, because space is at a minimum in this small cabin, so these little things actually end up being significant. My stovepipe at the cabin, this hasn't changed, but the stovepipe goes vertical for a fair section and then makes 2 turns before going up the roof. And that was done probably 2 reasons for that. One is to get the stovepipe closer to the peak, so there was less risk of a snow load building up on the roof, sliding off and damaging the stovepipe coming out of the cabin. And then the other benefit is just it keeps more stovepipe inside, so there's more opportunity for heat to come off that stovepipe and heat up the living space. This pipe here I put in, and I just use this as a place to put the kettles after they're hot, again to be able to free up some stove space, but also have them easily accessible if I'm cooking. So as we continue to make our way around the cabin, so the back wall is to my right here. This is the downstream wall, so I have 4 windows in the cabin, or in this main part of the cabin, 1 in each wall. The front window now is just open. There's not a window there because I've put the extension in. So I'm sitting on just a storage bin that is also a seat. So I have some fire starting supplies in here and some gloves and just different things stored in there. I did redo my window frames this year. I had some tamarack that my neighbor gave me that we sawed out and tried quarter sawing it to get a little better grain pattern and put it up here. I think it looks good. I've stained 2 of the 4 frames that I've done. One thing though, people often ask about green wood and different species, but this tamarack, I thought it had been dried fairly good, but I got it in here, and obviously the wood stove really sucks the moisture out of it, but it shrunk a fair amount even after it sat drying throughout the summer at my sawmill. Above the window I was just sitting at is this spice rack, which is a Pinterest project that I was inspired to do. It's supposed to look like a mountain range, but you can store the spices on that. This is the most recent project at the cabin, is this butcher block countertop. I haven't even shown the completed product in a video before, but it's done now. I did have a video out showing getting it to almost the finishing steps, but not actually finishing the butcher block, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'd never tried making butcher block before. I probably didn't have all the right tools to do it, but all that being said, it turned out really good and allows me a much bigger space to be able to work on than what I had before. The kitchen that I more or less threw together at the cabin when I first built it was pretty rough. There was some storage underneath it and there was room for a sink, but there was pretty limited space for any sort of food prep. But this butcher block countertop it's 2 feet deep, and I think it's about 80 inches wide. 1 sink, and I actually got a smaller sink than the one I had before, because the sink I had before was a double basin sink that would have used up almost half of this countertop. This one's 13 inches by 15 inches and is plenty big for what I need to do for dishes at the cabin, but also allows a lot more countertop space. There's a video showing this whole build, but just in short, so there's 2 sets of doors on each side, and in the center just open cabinet. So I've got my drinking water here, just a storage box there. Underneath this side, I've got some cleaning supplies and a bucket. So the bucket is what I use to drain the water from the sink into the bucket, and then I just will pour that water out as needed outside. And then on this side, I've got some dishes, some other things to store. I still need to organize it a little bit better, but it's a much nicer upgrade than what I had. And the biggest things I wanted to show you is the top of it, because I think it turned out really well. So what I used to build this butcher block is I had 2x2 maple. There were slabs that we cut quite a while ago, had drying inside, so they were good and dry. Cut them into 2x2s, used a benchtop planer to plane them down as good as I could, and then placed them all together, glued them, clamped them, let them sit, and then to finish it, I used just a natural stain to make the grain come out a little bit better, and then this Osmo Polex oil. So I used this on the countertop, and I think it looks pretty good. So I have a series of these open shelves around the cabin. The reason for the open shelves was, it's nice to have stuff in cabinets for sure, but also it's nice to have things in the open because it can prevent you from accumulating as much clutter, I think. And if ever mice get in here, it's just less of a place that they can get into and build nests. Although, knock on wood, I have not had any mouse problems in this cabin in the 4 years it's been here. For New Year's here, I used, first time I really used this kitchen space to make anything, and it was just so much nicer to have the right amount of space to be able to make something. So, you can't, I guess there's different approaches to building a cabin or building a home. If you're doing it yourself, if you try to make everything perfect the first time, it might take you a little bit longer. The way I did it is I built the shell of the cabin well, but some of the things on the inside I've upgraded over time, and this was one that I really took my time and upgraded, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. For lighting at this level of the cabin, so I've got two lights that run off solar. So this one here runs off of a Bluetti power bank that I keep on the upper level of the cabin, and that Bluetti charges off of two solar panels on the roof. And then I have this light here, which is a Kedron solar light from the Cabin Depot, and this one charges off a separate solar panel that only charges this, and so there's a panel outside that will charge this. So that's what I have for lighting on the lower level of the cabin for solar lighting. And then I also have this lantern that I mentioned earlier. And this is the upstream wall of the cabin. So along this wall I've got the couch. It takes up most of the space. To the right of the couch right now I have a Christmas tree. To the left of the couch a boot rack, which is at the entrance to the cabin. And that's this side. I guess there's also another spoon board here, so some storage there. I got a pair of snowshoes on it as well. And that's an overview of the original main cabin. The dimensions of this part of the cabin are 12 feet by 12 feet. And so you can think to yourself, if you're ever building a cabin, is 12 foot by 12 foot big enough? Well, based on what I've got inside the cabin, you could make it work. You'd have to probably replace this couch with a bed, but then that would give you a place for heat, your wood stove, a storage of firewood. It would give you a kitchen space with a sink and drinking water, a couch or bed, depending on what you chose, and then a bench on the opposite side for seating, as well as plenty of storage space. So it would be tight for two people, but for one person building an off-grid cabin, I think 12 by 12 is an adequate size. Now that being said, for me, as time went on, I recognized the need for more space, and so I decided to build an extension on the cabin, which I think I started over 2 years ago, I guess, and would have finished in the fall of 2022. So we'll head out there and I'll give you the tour of that part of the cabin now. Okay, this is the addition or extension to the cabin. So I added on a 10 foot by 12 foot room to the front of the cabin. And this room was just, as I mentioned, 12 foot by 12 foot can work for a cabin. But for me, I found that space was becoming a bit tight, and I wanted to put this space on the front just to give, when there's people here or if we're staying here, that you have more space, more comfort, and a little bit of separation if I wanted to do something in here and someone else wanted to do something in the main part of the cabin. So come on in. As you walk in, on your right, I've got a bookshelf, which is a combination of some books and some storage. And then if you continue walking in, we have another spoon board that I've got my snowshoes stored on for now. Table, and that's a new thing. Actually, I just put this table in this fall. And so the table's nice that you can have food or games or whatnot and actually have a table space to play it on, because before that you kind of had to sit in the main cabin, either on the couch or the bench across from the cabin. There really wasn't a centralized space to be able to share time together at a table. So that's in here now. And then the layout for this room, I have 5 windows, so it's quite bright, which can be nice, just that it gets a little more sunlight than the original cabin. And so you have 3 windows overlooking the stream, so you can watch the stream from in here. And over in this downstream corner is where I have my desk, so I can do some work or edit or work on video here, or read, or just whatever. It allows me a little bit of a workspace. And then this corner of the cabin is where I have a lot of my electronics. This box here, power input, is that's wired in from the generator, so the generator plugs in at the outside of the cabin, and then when it's running, it'll power anything plugged into here. And then this Bluetti unit that I've got to my right will charge off of both the generator but also the solar panels that I have outside. Right now they're sitting on the picnic table that I've got. That picnic table, actually, when I first built it, I built it down closer to the stream, but we had a really big flood this fall, and it actually picked up and moved the picnic table. So I brought it up onto higher ground. But right now I'm using it for the winter as a mount for my solar panels. And the solar panels will charge this when there's sun. Right now they're not getting any sun on them, so there's nothing coming in. But yeah, this Bluetti unit is a 2000 watt hour unit. So I use this to run, I use it to run this fridge up here. I use it to charge most of my electronics, computer, cameras, phone, all that sort of stuff. Whereas the upstairs Bluetti unit I use to run internet and charges a few devices up there, some lights and whatnot, but we'll get up there in a minute. On this end, so this is the back end of the addition. I've got this, so everything is sort of on this storage unit that I built, and then I have this fan here. So this fan charges off solar, and it moves air, warm air, from that part of the cabin into this room. I found that when I put this addition on, it just took a while for this room to warm up. So I think the combination of the damper in the stove and this fan moving that air has really helped a lot. So right now, I think in this room, we're at 22 degrees Celsius. It's definitely warmer in where the stove is, but 22 degrees Celsius is a pretty warm room. And then I've got a fridge here, or cooler basically, but it functions as a fridge. You can adjust the temperature of that. That runs off of this Bluetti. In the winter, I'll often just transition stuff to keep it outside to keep it cool, in a cooler. But in the summer, this is really nice to be able to keep everything that you want to have cool, kept cool. And in the summer, you have a lot more solar power, so the demands of power for this in the summer are higher because you have to use it to keep things cool. But there's a lot better sun exposure to keep this charged, and that this can run 24 hours a day all summer off of this unit and the 2 solar panels that I've got out there, and including other power demands I may put on this, like charging cameras and phones and that sort of thing. Okay, so now we'll go up to the second level. So that's a tour of the initial cabin, the addition on the front of the cabin. Now we'll go upstairs. We'll start at the loft on the front and then work our way back to the bedroom, and that'll be a complete tour of the cabin. So let's go up. All right, welcome to the upstairs of the Dovetail log cabin. So I'm at the front of the cabin, and there's a door behind me that'll take us out to the loft. So we'll go out there and I'll show you that, and then we'll come back inside. So this spot out here, I'd say I don't use it as much as you might think, but I do use it certain times of the year. Winter is not maybe the best time, although right now it feels quite nice because the cabin's so warm. But like the fall and spring, it can be very nice out here because I've screened it in so there's no insects. You can sit and watch the stream. And one thing I've noticed watching the stream from this angle is that you can actually see under the water easier from up here for some reason. If you sit and watch, sometimes you'll see either fish or a turtle or just the activity of what's going on. And that can be nice up here. I screened in the front and then I made 4 windows that are on hinges that'll open. So it really is a nice spot to be able to sit and watch the stream. Have a coffee and just relax. So we'll head back inside, but I just wanted to show you this spot because it is kind of a special feature of the cabin that that when people watch the channel, they'll often comment that they think they'd love to spend some time up here, and I do too. Let's head back inside and we'll continue the tour. It's actually really nice out here on the loft or the porch right now, because the cabin, I've had a fire going all morning and the upstairs of the cabin is really quite warm, but we'll head back inside and finish the tour. Over here on the upstairs of the cabin, I have 2 solar areas. So I have the one downstairs that I showed you earlier, and then I have this one up here. This one up here is a smaller capacity Bluetti unit, and so that's powering a few things. So I have satellite internet, and that powers that, as well as the modem that transmits the internet signal. I have a cell phone signal booster that's here. That's powered off of this. That doesn't take much wattage at all. But without that, I have absolutely 0 cell signal here ever. And so that's the setup I've got here. This is all charged off of either the generator when it's running or solar. This Bluetti unit can't run both at the same time. So if I'm running the generator, I'll plug that in. Or if I want, I can plug in solar. There's not a lot of sun on the panels right now. Actually, not much at all, 15 watts. And I might run the generator later. So that's this corner of the upstairs of the cabin. The door that I've just come in and out of to the loft, same style as the lower cabin door, 2 pieces of pine with a small board in between them to connect them, and just a latch to keep that closed. I redid the frame around the door earlier this year with some spruce just to clean that up, and then I built this to look like the Dovetail cabin in the sense of I had timbers separated by a 2-inch gap, but I ended up covering that gap with just a board because I didn't chink it when I chinked the cabin, and then I just decided I didn't want to bring mortar and cement and whatnot in and out through the cabin after I'd had kind of the floor and everything finished. So I finished that with just boards, but I actually think it looks pretty good. Now I'm standing in what I refer to as the bridge. So the bridge is just the corridor or hallway that I built between the front part of the upstairs of the cabin and the back part of the bedroom. So I built that on 3 timbers that you can see from below here, and then just boarded in a floor over top. There's not much in the bridge really. I have some clothing hanging and some clothing storage, a little bit of storage underneath. Where the rafters come down, there's little cubbies all along the cabin that are an opportunity for storage space. And then you can walk the bridge. But well, I guess it'd be 12 feet or so long, and that takes you into the bedroom. The cabin itself, so the way I built it to have this open area is I built the original cabin, then I put a 2-foot knee wall. I supported a ridge beam with vertical posts, so there's the gable end on each end, and then a vertical post here and a vertical post there, and that's what supports the ridge beam. The ridge beam is actually 3 logs lap jointed together, and then the rafters are almost at a 45-degree angle, and those go from the ridge beam down to the top of the knee wall. And then this is the back of the upstairs of the cabin, which is the bedroom. So the bedroom, we've got a bed that's positioned. I used to actually have it positioned this way, but I decided to turn it this way because I think it uses the space a little better. I'd like to build a bed frame. I actually built a bed frame last year, didn't like it, so I ended up getting rid of it. So I'd like to build a bed frame to get that off the ground, which would be nice for a few reasons, but maybe the main reason is that then you could have even more space underneath for storage. And then in front of the bed, which is the upstream wall of the cabin, I've got some storage here, so clothing and whatnot here, as well as underneath. On these two pine benches that I built, that's the bedroom storage space for now. And then beside the bed, I've got this fir log, balsam fir log here that I use as a bedside table with a light and a Bluetti power unit that I will charge and bring over here. And that'll charge my phone overnight, keep this light charged, and it also actually has a built-in light. So, and that's the bedroom. The back wall of the bedroom has this window here, a new window frame that I also did last year. And so when it gets warm up here, what I'll do is I'll open these windows a little bit, and then the front door at the upstairs of the cabin a little bit, and that'll create a really nice airflow. And it's amazing how little I need to open this. Like if I open this a crack, and which I usually keep this one open a crack, but if I open a little bit more and then open that door a little bit, you'll get some airflow, and it'll keep the either cool it off or keep the temperature nice, depending, because obviously the wood stove being below, the heat will come up here, and this area stays nice and warm, which is great for cold winter nights, that you can keep the cabin or keep the space where you're sleeping really warm well into the night, without needing to put wood in the fire. That's a tour of the Dovetail log cabin. I tried to strike a balance between showing you some of the details without going into too much detail. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it helpful. If there's areas you'd like me to explore more or you have interest in, let me know. Yeah, I'm excited for the year ahead. I think I do have some neat projects in mind, some bigger project that I'm thinking of starting. So I'll keep you posted on my thinking on that. Thanks for watching the video, and Happy New Year to you and your families and your friends and all of you watching the channel. Thanks for your support. So take care.